I've been asked to give a study on Revelation, which we will do, but instead, maybe we'll do something bigger. Not maybe, we will. You see, the book of Revelation really is history. The book of Revelation is a history. In fact, it's a sweep of history from the fall of Satan all the way to eternity. And I thought, why not do something big? Expressing the idea. We did discuss it, and we thought, why not do an entire sweep of human history? History of the world, from the beginning, and include Revelation and what's to come. So that's what we'll do. History of the world, past, present, because there are factors going on right now that will impact the future, and then the future. We talk about history. History, as it's normally taught, and history as the Bible presents it, it seems like there's two different pictures. Accepted human history and biblical human history. I faced this dilemma when I was growing up. And I just accepted both versions at the same time. I accepted what I learned in school. That human beings start out as like cavemen. Primitive people. Kind of like Fred Flintstone. There were these Cro-Magnons and Neanderthals. And gradually they progressed. Gradually they learned agriculture and tools. Somewhere along the line they invented the wheel. Discovered fire. There was Stone Age, Bronze Age, Iron Age. They had to learn how to write. In fact, before that they had to learn how to speak. And somewhere in there was an Ice Age. Never quite got where it was, but on a test I just put Ice Age in the test paper somewhere. So that's accepted human history. That in general, people start out primitive like Fred Flintstone and gradually work their way up. Before I go on, let me say something. In general, there's archaeological evidence for that. They're not just fabricating that. There is archaeological evidence for that scenario I just painted. That human beings progressed through those different ages. And some Christians don't want to deal with this, but there's archaeological, in fact there's fossil record for those Cro-Magnons and Neanderthals. There's no evidence for evolution in a macro sense, but there's evidence that there were those beings in the fossil record, and I'm sure you've seen them. I'm going to bring some pictures of them. They don't seem human, but they don't seem like apes either. So there is archaeological evidence for this big picture of people, primitive people, gradually advancing up. And I always accepted that. But at the same time, simultaneously, I always accepted the biblical view. And the biblical view of human history, in many ways, is much different. For example, the first human being, we call him Adam. His name was Adamah. Adamah, which means red clay. Well, he could speak. He didn't have to learn how to speak. And he certainly wasn't a Neanderthal or a Cro-Magnon man. He was a fully functioning human being who could talk. And he didn't have to gradually learn agriculture. Adamah was a gardener. And from the beginning, he worked in the garden. His son, what about fire? Well, his son, Abel, made a fire for a sacrifice. He had another son who built a city. 7 generations down, we have somebody practicing metallurgy with alloys, bronze and iron. And in those early chapters of Genesis, we don't find any record of any advance from the Stone Age, Bronze Age, Iron Age. Like immediately, they're doing metallurgy. But what about writing? Well, the first human being, Adamah, he could write. How do we know? Because Moses refers to a document written by him. So you got, think of the big picture in the Bible. You got Adam, then you got Noah, Abraham, David. Where does the Ice Age fit in there? I don't find any slot to put it there. Again, let me stress, there's archaeological evidence for Ice Age. So we got the two different pictures. One, a gradual progression from primitive to sophisticated. Another one, man was already civilized at the very beginning. And archaeological evidence for both. So we have quite a disconnect there, but let me give you something. Let me tell you this. This is what we'll be exploring the next few weeks. The Bible, and only the Bible, describes both of those pictures. It's the only source of information that explains how there's archaeological evidence for a progression and a culture that was high early. Only the Bible. Now let's begin with where accepted human history, the ones you'll find in the history books, and the Bible both agree. And there are points of agreement. And here's the main point of agreement. Accepted history and biblical history both say that the first human beings as we know them and the first human civilization as we know it happened in one place. And that would be in the Tigris-Euphrates River Valley. On your handout, it's that map with a square. Highly technical, professionally produced maps here. See the map on the top and the square right above the Persian Gulf? Human accepted history and biblical history both say the first human civilization was right there. That would be the area of Iraq and Kuwait, which, thanks to President Bush, are two separate countries. Right? But over time, there's been a development in the idea of who were those people. See? They all agree that's where the first civilization was, but it's taken a while to identify who exactly were those people in that area. You see, before the mid-1800s, it was generally accepted that the first human civilization in that Tigris-Euphrates River Valley was the civilization of Babylon, led by the king Nimrod. Name sound familiar? And that would have been about 10,000 BC. Now, the only way people knew, though, historians knew about this culture, Babylon, Nimrod, was through ancient historians like Herodotus, the Greek historian. But in the mid-1800s, archaeologists from Britain, France, and Germany actually came to the Middle East, and they started digging. Now, they didn't dig it in the ground. They started digging in the mounds. They would find these little hills that were obviously man-made. Archaeologists always know if you have level ground and you have these hills that are man-made, that those are cities under there buried. Why? Because ancient people, they would build a city, it would be destroyed by an invading army, or just they would move away and then sands would come and pile up on it. They would rebuild the city, but they wouldn't level what was there before. They would just build right on top of it. That's why you go to Jerusalem, the area where Jesus lived is way down below. So people would see these mounds that are called tells, and they would start until they started digging in these mounds in the mid-1800s. They found things, some things they expected to find, and they found some things that were totally unexpected. When they were digging these mounds, what did they expect to find? They expected to find tablets of clay, which they did. And these tablets were written in what was called cuneiform. C-U-N-E-I-F-O-R-M. Cuneiform. Actually, that's a word that meant, in that language, in their original language, signs. Remember that. Remember that word. I'm going to ask you to hold a lot of words in your mind. That's the first one. Remember the word signs for cuneiform. Now, these tablets referred to that civilization called Babylon, where the king was Nimrod. What did that confirm? That confirmed, yes, the first civilization in the world was the Babylon, and it was Nimrod, the king Nimrod. However, they found some things that they did not expect to find. They found other tablets referring to a previous civilization right in that same area, right in that square, the Tigris-Euphrates River Valley, and they refer to a civilization that had been there, and let me quote, before the flood. So they found tablets with lists of kings. They had a list of 10 kings that lived before the flood, and a list of 10 kings that lived after the flood. And they gave incredibly long lives to the kings before the flood. Also, they found tablets that referring to this previous civilization as being much higher culture than what people had at that time. These tablets referred to a civilization with high technology and high arts. And then they found tablets in these mounds referring to a previous world where gods and goddesses interacted with human beings. intermingled with humanity. They were called demigods, half gods, half men. The archaeologists at that time thought, well, those are legendary stories. Some ancient myths about high technology and flourishing civilization and people who lived a long time, gods and goddesses, half gods, half men interacting with people. These are legendary accounts. But they did start rewriting history books in the mid-1800s to reflect that. So history books in the mid-1800s will start referring to, well, this ancient civilization of Babylon under Nimrod had a glowing tales of these myths and legends of a previous world where gods and goddesses interacted. 1920s changed everything. A man named Leonard Woolley from Britain, or as he would have said, Leonard Woolley. Leonard Woolley was a British archaeologist, and he went to the Middle East. And he began to dig. He wasn't digging in those mounds like the other people had. He started digging at ground level and digging down. Now, he, as the previous archaeologist, he found some things he totally expected, but he found some unexpected things too. As he's digging down, the first thing he found that he expected, he found tablets that were similar to tablets they had found in those mounds. He found tablets referring to the culture of Babylon and King Nimrod. So, well, he thought, yes, well, that confirms what we've always known. The first civilization here in the Tigris-Euphrates River Valley was Babylon under King Nimrod. But then, he wanted something more. Woolley wanted to find, where were those ages? Where was the Stone Age? Where was the invention of the wheel and the fire? Where's all that? He thought it must be deeper. So he kept digging. He kept digging deeper. And then he found something very unexpected. He found a layer of silt. You're thinking, wow, that makes my day. Actually, that was very unexpected. In that area, it's sand. Plenty of sand there, but no silt. Now, silt, let me tell you about silt. Well, let me tell you about Woolley first. Woolley not only was an archaeologist, he was a trained geologist, and he knew something about silt. Silt only is present in areas where they've been laid by water. In fact, a very quick application of water, because silt particles are like little marbles. Try to hold a bunch of marbles down. They'll slide all over the place. So whenever you have a layer of silt, that means a very quick application of water. He kept digging, and he was more surprised to find that it was 8 to 10 feet deep. Now what that means is that not only was it a quick application of water, it was a massive, heavy application of water to account for a 8 to 10 foot layer of silt. And Woolley was astonished because he realized the floods that remember the tablets that said there was a flood, there were kings that lived before the flood and after the flood. Woolley thought this is the flood they were referring to. And being the son of a clergyman in England, he realized, well, that flood that described really happened. Now, he did some quick calculations. It was really easy to calculate because he realized that in order to have a 10-foot layer of silt, remember, picture a bunch of marbles and try to keep them confined. No. It must have been a very heavy application of water. He calculated what weight of water would have been required to consolidate a 10-foot layer of silt, and he realized that the water would have been so high, and also realized you can't pile water up. You ever notice that? Go make a pile of water somewhere. It won't pile up. I tried. He realized if there was that much water there to accommodate 10-foot layer of silt, it must have covered the whole world. Well, he kept digging. And at the bottom of the silt, he found red clay. And he found some tablets, also written in cuneiform, and he was astonished. He found hundreds and hundreds of tablets, all written in cuneiform, signs, remember, that's our word, signs. He found a picture of another world. And first he went to Eridu. You look on your map? He went to Eridu, and he found a tablet. Here's what the tablet said. Near here was a garden, in which was a mysterious sacred tree planted by the gods. He found this under that 10-foot layer of silt in the red clay. His team brought him another tablet they had found. Here's what the tablet said. Near here was the first home of the world's first king, Adapa. That's close, wasn't it? What was Adam's name? Adamah. Now, we're starting to see a pattern here. We see in all these tablets. There's always a reference to events that we know happened, but they're twisted. Adamah, Adapa. I guess Adam was the Pa and Eve was the Ma, right? There's a pattern here. Let me say it again. These tablets obviously refer to the events that we know happened, but they're twisted. Here's another tablet that said, the wife of the first king was created by the goddess of the rib. See, some element of truth. And let me stress again, people who wrote these tablets obviously did not have knowledge of the Bible. They're referring to events that they knew. Here, another tablet refers to the first king, Adapa, angered the gods because of knowledge. Does that sound familiar? Once again, clearly referring to those events that we know, but not from the Bible. For 12 years he excavated there, and he found tablets describing a world where these people accepted that gods and goddesses interacted with them. See, the tablets above the flood said, wow, the previous world, gods and goddesses were there. The tablets below the flood, below the silt layer, just refer almost nonchalantly to gods and goddesses, half gods, half human beings, interacting with them. He found not only tablets, he found seals. Now, a seal itself would have represented very high technology, because a seal was like this. They would get a very hard piece of rock, and with very fine tools. In fact, tools, we can't do it today without modern tools. They would carve images into this hard stone, very fine, and then press them into clay tablets while they were still soft, and then harden them and make a seal. On your handout, I put one of those seals. It didn't copy very well. I kept finding different shades of light and dark. Let me kind of describe what's on this seal. From again, where was the seal found? Below the 10-foot layer of silt and before the flood, obviously. Well, right in the center we have a tree. On the right-hand side you have a man, and it looks like he's got horns. It's really a crown. So he was pictured as a king. On the left is a woman. She's also wearing a crown, which would have been unheard of in ancient civilization, meaning she was considered a co-ruler. Now, but see, with her left hand, she's got a long arm, doesn't she? With her left hand, she's about to pick a fruit. Behind her is a serpent, upright, who's whispering in her ear. Whoever made that seal knew something. That seal was carbon-14 dated to 13,000 BC. Scientists, beginning at the end of last century, studying DNA, comparing mitochondrial DNA of women, which is the same from woman to woman, generation to generation, with regular DNA, which changes. All they have to do is put those two side by side. They can now count back generations. And now scientists know that there was one woman who was the mother of all human beings. They call her mitochondrial Eve. And according to the DNA record, she lived 13,000 BC. If you use the numbers in the Septuagint Bible, also you have Adam and Eve, 13,000 BC. So you see, again, all these tablets, clearly they portray events in the Bible. But it's very important. We have evidence completely outside the Bible confirming those events. But they were twisted accounts.
Don't they place her in Africa?
No, they don't. No. I'm going to get to that maybe next week or the week after. They did originally. Now they realize she's Tigris, Euphrates River Valley. Now, do you see the pattern? Well, as I read those accounts, you think, yeah, somebody knew pretty much what had happened, but it was twisted. And what's really important, some misinformation was just spread around. But somebody, obviously, on purpose, twisted the story that he knew. And that's what was disseminated. By the way, if you want to read, there's many more tablets. They're very fascinating. Best place to look is a very simple book. It's called Haley's Bible Handbook, Halleys. It's like in its 400th printing. Don't read any of his commentaries. Just read the archaeological stuff at the beginning. Not only did he find tablets, Woolley I'm talking about, he also found interesting artifacts. He found painted pottery of great beauty. And the paint was of very high technology because the colors were still vivid in the pottery 15,000 years later. And he found tools, specifically bronze tools and iron tools. And he found a forge where metallurgy was conducted. He found mirrors, kilns, bricks, and he found cosmetics, mascara. He found things that certainly looked like curlers, hair curlers for women, and clips. I guess that's why Wilma Flintstone and Betty Rubble had those 1950 style hairdos. Now we know. He also found musical instruments, specifically two kinds. He found flute-type instruments and string-type instruments. And then he found business tablets describing sophisticated ways they were breeding livestock. And he found two chariots built of iron. Now remember, he was expecting to find primitive culture as he got down close to the beginning of cult civilization. Woolley was flabbergasted because he's obviously right at the beginning of human civilization, and they already have a high culture. They're already doing metallurgy. By the way, if you want to read yourself, it's still available. It's Woolley's own book. It's called Digging Up the Past. That's a simple title. Digging Up the Past. Now, obviously, Woolley was asking, now, who are these people? What is this civilization? Again, he knew as he went deeper, he was getting older, so he had fully expected, well, now here's where I'll find those ages. I'll find the Stone Age, the Old Stone, the Middle, the New, Bronze, the Iron. I'll find these Cro-Magnon, Neanderthals. I'll find those. Instead, he found a higher culture where people clearly could write. He found no signs of learning how to write. The people, he said, these are accounts describing the first king, the first civilization, and they can write. They got technology, arts, and music. So, he was at Eridu. He thought, I've got to find out who these people were. So he left Eridu, started wandering around, and he went to two other towns called Uruk and Ur. Ur is very famous to us because that's where Abraham grew up, Ur of the Chaldees. But Uruk had more interesting information. At Uruk, he found this tablet. We are the people who wander in sorrow. Remember the word wonder. What else are we remembering? Sign. Signs and wonders. Sign, but it's not wonder, it's wonder. We are the people who wander in sorrow. The word wonder is the word Sumer. So, the word Sumerians means the wanderers. History books now had to be rewritten again. Because now they knew that the first civilization of humanity were the Sumerians. I'll tell you in a minute. We know who those Sumerians were. They're identified in the Bible. Now again, we still have a little dilemma. Except that human history still shows that progress up. And let me remind you, there is archaeological evidence for that. But there's also evidence, as I've just shown you, that there's evidence for a culture that was highly advanced at the very beginning. And also remember, the Bible accounts for both. Now, first thing we want to say is that civilization that Woolley discovered, called Sumer, the Sumerians, is the same world described in Genesis chapters 4 through 5. Specifically, what Woolley found was the archaeological footprint of the line of Cain. In the first couple of chapters of Genesis, we have the creation, the fall. Cain kills Abel. God tells Cain, Cain, you're going to be a wanderer on the earth. And in Genesis 4:14, we have Cain's response. Behold, you have driven me this day from the face of the ground, and from your face I will be hidden. And I will be a vagrant and a wanderer on the earth. The word wanderer is the word Sumerian.
Would you spell that correctly?
Would I spell what?
Oh, right here, like in the title, Sumerian.
Yes, Sumerian. So literally what Cain said was, I will be a vagrant and a Sumerian on the earth, a wanderer. Whoever finds me will kill me. It's kind of odd. You think, well, wasn't he just the second generation? Adam and Eve had hundreds and hundreds of sons and daughters. They went out quickly, and so quickly that Cain didn't know who they were. Probably 100 years have passed, by the way, since the creation. Verse 15, the Lord said that God showed incredible mercy to Cain. Therefore, whoever kills Cain, vengeance will be taken on him sevenfold. And the Lord appointed a sign for Cain. The word sign is where we get the word cuneiform. So you see what, so that no one finding him would slay him. I think what happened was, there's the first writing people we could see was some mark on Cain, some sign. That was the basis of the language of cuneiform by which they wrote those tablets. Then Cain went out from the presence of the Lord and settled in the land of Nod, east of Eden. Now that's very important. He did not stay there, though. He was a wanderer, remember? Rememberer? He was a wanderer, rememberer? He first settled in the land of Nod. He built a city there. We'll see in a minute. But then what happened was, he kind of drifted back. So then what happened was, Adam and Eve and their immediate close family apparently stayed very close to the Garden of Eden there in Eridu. Their whole lives, I think they did not venture far away. Now, they were not in the area where the tree was, but they were very close by the Garden of Eden. Whereas Cain and his family, his line, rotated apparently about the perimeter. And also, apparently, there was not interaction between Adam and Eve's family and, well, I don't know how to say it because Cain was also in their family. The ones who stayed close to Adam and Eve stayed in the area of the Garden of Eden. Cain moved out, and then his line sort of moved in a perimeter around the Garden of Eden, but there was not interaction between the two groups. Huh? More sons and daughters of Adam and Eve he'd lost track of. Yes, sibling. Yes, his own. And people always say, where did Cain get a wife? Well, one possibility is he married a sister. I think that's not what happened. Now, obviously, somebody did. In fact, a lot of them did. And you see, early on, there would not have been a problem with inbreeding and DNA corruption and all that so close to the source. So, Cain did not necessarily marry a sister. He probably married a niece or a great niece because it's somebody he didn't know. In fact, Cain left, and immediately he built a city. Verse 17, Cain had relations with his wife, and she conceived and gave birth to, in our English Bibles, it's called Enoch. It was actually Uruk, U-R-U-K. And he built a city, and he called the name of the city Uruk, after the name of his son. So Cain built a city called Uruk. Let me tell you about another tablet that Woolley found. And let me tell you where he found this tablet. He found this tablet under the city called Uruk. Here's what the tablet said. Cain, K-A-I-N, built this city with twin towers. Cain, K-A-I-N, built this city with twin towers. He did not build some little shack place. He didn't build some ghetto. He built a major city with twin towers. Yeah, I don't know what to make of that.
Yeah.
But I just don't know. Cain, K-A-I-N, was Lord over the city. See what Cain's saying? I'm not going to be a wanderer. I'm going to build a big city here. I'll show God. Let me tell you something about this word, Uruk. But do you see the pattern again? Somebody wrote those tablets with knowledge of the same events described in Genesis, but they kept twisting. Now, so we have Enoch. His name was really Uruk. Linguistically, over the years, that K became a G. So that word became Uruk. Oh, let me back up. Uruk became the common word for city. Uruk became the common name for city throughout not only the Sumerians but Babylonians. Throughout the Middle East, whenever you said Uruk, that meant a city because it was the first city. But it became Uruk. And then, again, linguistically, that became Urg. And to this day, well, it became B-U-R-G-H. From U-R-U-K to U-R-U-G to U-R-G-H. And then it became Berg. So today, whenever you see Pittsburgh or any kind of Berg, it's still a reflection of that first word for city. What we have here is the line of Cain. To Enoch was born Irad. Irad became the father of Mehujael. Mehujael became the father of Methushael. And Methushael became the father of Lamech. And that's the beginning of a long line of the line of Cain. Now, there's two interesting features about the line of Cain. First feature is they had astonishingly high technology, but they were spiritually deteriorating. You see, they moved away from the Garden of Eden, from Adam and Eve. But that was a picture of the fact that they moved away spiritually from God. And their names show how quickly the culture of Cain deteriorated, these Sumerians. Just the names alone. We know Cain, and then Uruk, and then we have Irad. The name Irad means the glory of man. See what they're already exalting? Myself. It gets worse. Mehujael means struck by God. See, he's defiant now. His son, Methushael, you're not ready for this. That means the death of God. Oh. Now you see why they started fabricating these stories of these gods and goddesses in that tree? They took the real account that we know from Genesis and they twisted it. Instead of having the one omnipotent God, now they have gods and goddesses. They're twisting it. The death of God, the death of the true God, we'll make our own. Then we have Lamech. Lamech took to himself 2 wives. I meant to calculate this and I forgot to. Excuse me a minute. Let me do some calculating here. 2, 3, carry the 2 and the 5. I know all my gazintas. 4 goes into 16 4 times. Okay, I come up with 1 too many. 1 too many wives. You come up with the same. Yeah. He's the first polygamist. He got 2 wives. I love their names. The one was named Adah and the other was Zillah. A and Z. I guess he wanted to know women from A to Z. Well, he did. So he's got 2 wives, Adah and Zillah. Adah and Zillah. Not only are they lovely, they have a couple of nice kids. Now here's Adah. Adah gave birth to Jabal. Look at this. He was the father of those who dwell in tents and have livestock. It literally means, it says, who breed livestock. Remember what we saw on the tablets? That's where they bred livestock in Samaria. And Adah apparently had twins, Jabal and Jubal. Here's Jubal. He was the father of all those who play the lyre. Don't think about politicians playing the lyre. Different word. The lyre and the pipe, a stringed instrument and a flute. Sound familiar? That's exactly what Woolley found. In fact, I believe Woolley found the instruments that Jubal had made. Now, Lamech had another wife, Zillah. She also gave birth to, this is an important person in world history, Tubal-Cain. He was the forger of all implements of bronze and iron. There's what Woolley found, wasn't it? Below that 8-foot layer of silk, he found a forge, and he found bronze and iron. He did not find any sign where there had been a progress from a Stone Age to the Bronze Age to an Iron Age. Immediately, at the dawn of civilization, they're practicing metallurgy. And I did tell you something about Tubal-Cain. Tubal-Cain. The word, you see this prefix "tu"? It was a prefix. It was not part of his name. It's an honorific title. It means like Your Majesty. So his name was Bull-Cain, which became Vulcan, the god of fire. Vulcan. Obviously that became Vulcan. Now, let me write one more thing up here. There's a man named Arthur Custance. Custance. Unfortunately, his books are not in print anymore. But Arthur Custance wrote a series of books called the Doorway Papers. And by the way, all kinds of great archaeological scholarly work about the early world, including the fossils you'll see in the next couple of weeks. It was Custance who pointed out, and I realized that linguistically, the name Tubal-Cain became Vulcan. So think about it. Think how that happened. We had this guy, Tubal-Cain, who miraculously is doing things no one else could do, and they assigned him the status of a semi-god. But hold that thought. I'll explain to you why he could do those things other people couldn't do. That became the basis of a god Vulcan. And Arthur Custance paints a very clear picture that all those gods, Zeus, Jupiter, Cupid, any of the Greek or Roman gods, he traces every one of them back to these people in the line of Cain. To Jabal, Jubal, Tubal-Cain, Lamech, Irad, Methusael. He traces every one of the Greek gods back to these people in Sumeria. Now, the line of Cain, you see, was Sumeria. That's clearly the civilization uncovered by Woolley. Think about it. It's beneath the flood into the red clay and its wonders. Now, meanwhile, let me back up. Let me stress something. It was obviously the people whose names I just read to you. They were the ones who made those tablets, and they are the ones who distorted the biblical account. But first they knew it, didn't they? They knew what had happened, but they distorted it. And anybody whose name is death of God, struck by God, well, they would certainly twist those accounts and put those down the tablets. You may think, well, are there any accounts reflecting the total truth? Hold that thought, because meanwhile, back at the Garden of Eden area, another line is starting from Adam and Eve, and that's the line of Seth. Adam had relations with his wife again, and she gave birth to a son and named him Seth. For she said, God has appointed me another offspring in place of Abel, for Cain killed him. The word Seth means it is appointed. To Seth, to him also a son was born, and he called his name Enosh. It's actually Enosh. And the word Enosh means mortal man. See the difference in the names already? They're not naming their sons struck by God, the death of God. They're naming their sons mortals. Then men began to call upon the name of the Lord. Why? Because they recognized their fallen condition and went to the cross. That was the difference between the line of Cain and the line of Seth. We go to Genesis 5:3. Adam had lived 130 years and became the father of a son in his likeness, according to his image, and named him Seth. Verse 5, all the days that Adam lived were 930 years. Remember, the tablets referring to long, long lives before the flood, and he died. By the way, that's one of the saddest verses in the whole Bible. Adam was created to live forever. God said, in the day you eat of the tree, dying, you will die. You eat of the tree, you'll start dying right away, and ultimately you'll die. There he died. I'm not going to go through all these names, but I want you to see a pattern. We have Seth, verse 8, he died. What about Enosh in verse 9? Verse 11, Enosh died. Verse 13, Enosh had a son, Kenan. Verse 14, he died. Verse 15, Mahalalel, that's the next one. Verse 17, he died. Verse 18, his son was Jared. Verse 20, he died. 21, Enoch. Oh, we got a different one here, don't we? Verse 24, he was not, for God took him. Enoch was raptured as he was raptured as a picture of those who will be raptured before the great tribulation. He had a son, Methuselah, verse 27. Methuselah lived 969 years, the longest life of any human being, although I think Dick Clark is coming very, very close. And he died, and then Lamech, and then Noah. I'm going to talk about those names in a minute, but see, at the beginning of the human race, we have two lines, don't we? We have the line of Seth. That's the godly line. Were they good people? They went to the cross. Now, not everybody in that line that I just read was saved. We just don't know. What we do know is they preserved the revelation of the truth. And it was that line that preserved not only the coming Messiah, the knowledge of Him, but that was the line through which Messiah would come. It's called the godly line. But we have the line of Cain, the ungodly line, meaning they rejected the cross. They twisted the truth. They created these gods and goddesses, and they were called the Sumerians. I'm sure you noticed a lot of contrast between the line of Seth and the line of Cain. Some of it very surprising. Some of it we would think was reversed. Did you notice in the line of Cain, when I read all those names, you did notice that all their accomplishments were mentioned, wasn't it? Oh, he was the father of everybody who plays music. He was the father of those who do livestock. He bronze and iron implements. All their accomplishments are mentioned, but nothing about their death. You see that in the line of Cain? Their deaths are not mentioned. But then we go to the line of Seth, and not one of their accomplishments are mentioned. Look at it again. Nothing. It's just how long they lived, and they died. Doesn't that seem reversed? The ungodly line, all their accomplishments are mentioned, their deaths are not mentioned. The godly line, not one word of anything they did, but their deaths are all mentioned. You think it'd be just the opposite. No, there's a reason. The reason that Cain's accomplishments are mentioned is that Cain was tied to this world. His line was tied to this world. And that's why he left an archaeological footprint that we can find. Whereas Seth, he left no archaeological record. You see, you can dig all you want to around or area, you won't find any sign of this godly line. You won't find any tablets there. You won't find any tablets describing the truth. None. You go outside of the area, you'll find tablets obviously referring to those true things, but twisted. You won't find any record of of Seth and his line that I just read. And that's exactly why they guarded the secret and told the account. Moses wrote the account. Adam wrote the account. Seth added to it. They preserved those tablets down through the line, down through the years, and presented them to Moses. Where Moses wrote the account of Genesis with the true account of those versions. The line of Seth left no footprint. You know why? Because they didn't do anything to leave a footprint. They were simple gardeners and farmers. Gardeners and farmers don't leave archaeological footprints. But you see, there's a spiritual picture there too. Cain's archaeological footprint is in the world to see because spiritually he was tied to the world. But he was away from God. He was a blasphemer. He twisted the revelation. He made up those stories about the gods and the goddess of the rib and all that. You see, the line of Cain is a picture of the unbeliever. They knew the truth, didn't they? You think Cain knew the truth? Oh, yes. He deliberately rejected it, and his line twisted those stories. Why are their deaths not mentioned? I'll tell you why. They were already spiritually dead. So, hate to be cruel about this, but since they were already dead, they're spiritually dead, weren't they? Well, frankly, their passing from this life was really just no big deal. Not worthy of note. They were already dead. The godly line was different. Their deaths are mentioned. In fact, how many years they lived. You know why? That mattered to God. He says, they don't leave a record, but they left a record with me. That's what God was saying. He says, I know you don't know anything about... I've got to look at the names again. I know you don't know anything about Mahalalel and Mahalajel and Kenan. God says, but I know how many years they live. They matter to me. And Their deaths mattered. Why? Psalm 116:15. Precious in the sight of the Lord is the death of His saints. The word precious, actually, a better word is poignant. Poignant, bittersweet. What does that mean? It means, well, he was very sad when they left, but he sure was glad to receive them to him. Now, you see, the line of Seth embraced the cross. And you see, the line of Seth is like us. We may not have a footprint down here of archaeology that find us, but our records are kept in heaven. And for the line of Cain, their passing was no big deal. And for us, this life is no big deal. And let me tell you something quickly about the names in the line of Seth, the godly line. The name Seth means it is appointed. The word Enoch means mortal man. I'm going to make a sentence out of this in a minute. Or actually, I might go into it. I believe the sentence is here. Seth means it is appointed. Enoch means mortal man. Kenan means sorrows. Mahalalel means the blessed God. Jared means came down. Enoch means teaching.
Now, are all these years the same as the years we have now?
They're exactly the same.
And that Enoch, is that different from the Enoch in Cain's line?
Yes, thank you. In Cain's line, it's actually Uruk. In Seth's line, it's actually Enoch. Methuselah means his death will bring. Starting to get a sentence here? Lamech, remember there was a Lamech in Cain's line too. Means strength. And the word Noah means comfort.
What?
Comfort. Tidings of comfort and joy. Get them all? Did you miss? Enoch? Seth, it is appointed. Enoch, mortal man. Kenan means sorrows. Yeah, I'm sorry. Enosh after Jared. I'm sorry. We have Seth, Enosh. I can't read my own writing. Yes. We have Seth, and then Enosh means mortal man. Kenan means sorrows. Mahalalel means the blessed God. Jared means came down. Then Enoch means teaching. Methuselah means his death will bring. Lamech means strength. And Noah means comfort. Can everybody get them all? You see the sentence there? It is appointed. All you have to do is add a couple, like 4 or 5 words. It is appointed that mortal man will have sorrows. But the blessed God came down, teaching us that His death will bring strength and comfort. The names, the line of Seth, tell the story of God Himself coming down, becoming a man, and dying and being our Savior, bringing strength and comfort. That's the line that went to Messiah. And you see, that's the footprint of the line of Seth right there. The footprint that leads to the cross. And notice one more thing. There is a Lamech in the line of Cain and a Lamech in the line of Seth. The word means strength. In the line of Cain, it means strength in myself. In the line of Seth, it means strength in the cross. I want to close by transitioning to where we'll go next week. Remember, in the world of Samaria, there are all these stories of the gods and goddesses. Half men, half gods. That had a basis in truth. Genesis 6:4, the Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men and bore children to them. These were the mighty men who were of old, men of renown. He's talking about what happened. Demons came in, interacted with human women. They had offspring that were half and half. So these people like Vulcan, people who had these what appeared to be supernatural abilities, they were supernatural abilities because they were demonized. That's where we'll pick up next week. I'll tell you what we'll find. We'll find that the Bible is not a history book. But what it says about history is true. And the Bible's not a science book, but what it says about science is true. Anybody have any questions about what we covered so far?
So,
Yeah?
pre-13,000, what you learned in school,
Uh-huh.
the development of the human race, what's the fifth?
That's where
Are we going over that next week?
in the next couple of weeks, we're going. In fact, it might take us 4. But what I want to cover is the fact that, again, there is archaeological evidence that there were Stone Ages. There was a Stone Age, Bronze, Iron, and there was a gradual transition. There is clearly evidence. I want to point how the Bible accounts for that, and also those fossils. Very important, because I want us to understand where those Cro-Magnon, Neanderthals. Father, again, we thank you for this account we have in your Word. We thank you that what you say is reliable. It sounds very simple to say, but yes, what you have described is true. We thank you for this powerful picture of this line of Cain with their great accomplishments, and they left a great archaeological footprint and kept rejecting the truth and going farther from you. But we have this great picture of the line of Seth. Not that they in themselves were better, not that they had more strength than the other line, but they simply trusted in you in the cross. We thank you for Jesus, whose death and the sin brought us into the line of Messiah, and we thank you in Jesus' name this morning. Amen.